Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1996 drama film, The People versus Larry Flynt. This film, when it came out, was pretty daring, pretty controversial, and it definitely left its mark. But this is a film that, to me personally, is even more relevant now. When you watch The People versus Larry Flynt, and you see what is going on today with attempts at mass censorship, attempts at trying to protect the children or protect people from content that a certain group of people deems to be offensive or obscene, it really clicks in a way that is so compelling and so thought provoking. It's so raw and it's so real and it hits so close to home when it comes to what is going on in the world today. Now, before I get around to sharing even more thoughts on the film, though, I want to give a special shout out to Andrew, who requested a review of this film. The People versus Larry Flynn is directed by Milos Forman. His direction in this film is really top notch. It's terrific. He does such a good job in terms of being able to handle the controversial subject matter in a way that definitely provides it some grandeur, definitely provides it a little bit of extra added sleaze, but also a slickness, a polish to it. It doesn't look like it's some amateur rush job or something that's, oh, it's about a CD pornographer. So let's make the movie look like it's something that would have been made by the guy in the 70s with no money. That's not the case at all with Milos's direction here. It's still very measured. It's still very strong, and he still showcases his tricks of the trade in every way possible here, with tracking shots, medium to wide to tight shots, different types of camera angles, and it's a film that is willing to be sordid, but it's also willing to be surreal visually, and it's also willing to have moments where it's real, where the camera is set up and positioned in a way where it feels like you're just a fly in the wall when it comes to certain negotiations with Penthouse or with Larry Flynt and his team, or uh, in the courtroom. In the courthouse when it comes to all these different legal cases that Larry Flynt ultimately gets involved with. And it's a movie that I think, with a different style or a different focus when it comes to the direction, could really not be as grand or as good as it ultimately is. But because Milos is the type of director who is genuinely fearless, he is willing to take risks. He's willing to go out there. He's willing to almost take a kind of fantasy approach in some ways to some of these sequences. And it really just makes the film have such a unique look and feel to it for what essentially is a courtroom drama. The People versus Larry Flynt is more courtroom drama than it is anything else. But because of the way that Milos directs it, it doesn't feel like it's stodgy and stuffy like other courtroom dramas tend to look and feel like. The People versus Larry Flynt features a screenplay by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. And as much as Milos's direction is something special and just brings so much to this movie, I don't think this film would be anywhere near as good as it is without the screenplay and without how genuinely amazing the script is in its own way by these two writers. They take a story that in itself is already really compelling. This battle of free speech that involves Larry Flynt and Hustler magazine versus Jerry Falwell and uh, uh, Larry Flynt's crusade throughout his life of fighting for free speech in the most outlandish and crazy ways imaginable. And this in itself is just really compelling, interesting stuff. But these writers take these real life cases, these court cases, and these news stories, and they create a narrative around it, and they create dialogue that complements it, that just makes this entire uh, story of Larry Flynt into something that is genuinely incredible to me. I think it features some really strong social commentary, especially when it comes to free speech and censorship. I mean, there's an entire sequence in this that to me is unbelievably thought provoking. And I will get to that a little bit later on. The story starts out with Flint as a child with his younger brother Jimmy, and they are hustling at a very young age. They're going around with a cart with moonshine, and they're going through the mud and the trees and going through the woods and going a long way just to get a couple bucks. And I really liked how the film started out with Larry as a child and really established his hustling mindset and how it was something that was ingrained in him from the very beginning. And then you flash forward many years later to 1972, where now he's an adult, and him and his brother run this strip club in Cincinnati called the Hustler Go Go. And Flint is always hustling, and so he's trying to think of a way to improve his business. And he gets a light bulb moment where he sees some photographs that were taken of his strippers, and then he decides to publish a newsletter for the club featuring nude photos of his strippers. Uh, News photos isn't really accurate, but I mean he does throw some news in there because it has to still be a newsletter. And then he calls this newsletter Hustler. The newsletter becomes a magazine, but the sales are initially not the best. But after Hustler publishes photos of Jackie Onassis sunbathing nude in 1972, it becomes a worldwide national sensation, and Larry decides to focus on it full time. Flint becomes smitten with this stripper that he just recently hired for the club called Althea. And she's underage at the time, but she's only underage by a day because she's going to turn 18 then the next day. I don't think the script really is trying to portray their relationship as anything other than just two fuck ups falling for one another, two people with their own issues and their own problems, deciding to join their issues and problems together in matrimony. Like that's really what's going on here with these two. And also it's based on a real story. So that's what actually happened. Hustler magazine is just getting more and more popular by the day. And because of that, he becomes a target. He becomes somebody who is now a target of anti-pornography activists. He argues with the activists later on, declaring that murder is illegal. But if you take a picture of it, you may get your name in a magazine or maybe win a Pulitzer Prize. However, sex is illegal, but if you take a picture of that act, you can go to jail. And to be honest, that's a really good point. It's it's the thought-provoking dialogue that I was talking about earlier. And that's the sequence that in my opinion is the most compelling scene in the entire movie. Like there's still some quite compelling scenes later on in the film, don't get me wrong. But this scene where Larry, after being arrested for selling pornography and losing a court case, he gets released and he pays a bunch of people to show up at a rally, and it's it's a ego stroking thing for him. That's really what it is. Like he's standing in front of a giant screen and talking in front of a podium in a stadium, not necessarily a stadium, but like in an auditorium with a decent amount of people, but all people that he hired himself to be there. But that doesn't change the integrity or the strength of his words, where he starts this speech and he starts talking about the hypocrisy that the media and other people have in regards to the way that war and other atrocities are being discussed or showcased in the media and in other magazines and newsletters, and how that's okay, that's acceptable to show war crimes, to show people and the brutal aftermath of war, to show actual dead bodies, to actually show all of that and glorify that in the media. But it's unacceptable and it's immoral and it's obscene to showcase acts of sex, to showcase women's breasts, to showcase their bush, their pussy, or the guys in their dicks and their balls and all of that stuff. Like it's obscene and just horrible and just unbelievably offensive to show all these things and to consume those things. But it's not obscene to consume war photos and war footage and to glorify war and blood and guts. Like, that is a really fantastic speech, to be honest, by Larry Flynt in this film. And it culminates with this quote that just really, to me, it still rings true to this day. It's still just as compelling of a thought now as it was back when the film came out in 1996. I ask you this: what is more obscene, sex or war? I think it's war. I honestly, I think it's a no question, a no brainer kind of thing too. Like, yeah, war is more obscene than sex. And there's really good points too about people die in war. People suffer all kinds of atrocities and go through all kinds of trauma in war. But who goes through trauma and gets PTSD or dies reading a porno magazine? Like that is just an absolutely absurd thing to me, that people are actually consider porno magazines or porn or just or sex to be more obscene than war. Like, war is so much more obscene. I mean, it's not even close. But the same people who wanted to ban porn, wanted to ban sex, wanted to talk about how immoral Hustler magazine is, and so on and so forth, are the same people that were a-okay with sending their sons or their children off to war to die and get their guts spilled for their country. That's okay. That's fine. That's not obscene. Or they're okay with the way the media portrays war and glorifies it and so on and so forth. But the sex, a woman's nipple. Oh my god, it's horrifying. It's horrible. That's immoral. But killing people, that's not immoral. Like who's dying when it comes to the photo shoot for Hustler? Nobody. Nobody's dying during the photo shoot. But people are dying in war. So yeah, I just loved that this script was willing to go there and have that conversation. And that honestly is the film itself. It's a film that is willing to be daring. It's willing to be controversial, just like Larry Flynt was. And I like how the script, it doesn't hold back on his controversies. It doesn't hold back on his drug addiction. It doesn't hold back on Althea and how she had her issues and struggled with her own trauma and her own pain and her own addictions. I like that it showcases the excess of Hustler and just how crazy and carnal and just and unbelievably ridiculous and over the top things got when it comes to this company and everything that was going on when Larry Flynt was the guy running the show. The screenplay, it's willing to go there. It's willing to talk about the carnality of the porn business and how lewd it is. It's willing to talk about the excess that was Hustler in its heyday, and also in Larry Flint's life. His mansion, the drugs, the women, the the adulation, but also the discrimination. The way that he was being discriminated against by other people because of the what he was doing and what he was promoting, and how that got him into trouble with the law, and then how he fought back against that, and then how he had a moment where he became born again. He got released from jail because the charges for pornography were overturned, and he winds up encountering Ruth Carter Stapleton, who is the sister of Jimmy Carter, and she seeks him out to get him to give his life to Jesus Christ and turn him around and even push for Hustler to become a more tasteful publication. And he goes all in. He goes all in on becoming a born again Christian. He gets baptized. And I like how the script is willing to point out how absurd and ridiculous this whole portion of his life is, and how he was being manipulated by uh, Carter and the Christian faith, and how it ultimately blew up in his face, and also just pointing out how absurd it is that Hustler magazine is trying to clean up their act and become a magazine that's for born again Christians, or just for Christians in general who also want to get their rocks off. Like, the two things do not connect at all. And you see it in like The Office, and how he's got this giant neon cross on the wall, and he's got all these paintings and stained glass windows, and it's just absolutely absurd and hilarious, to be perfectly honest. And I think this new approach might have been what caused him to become a literal target for his assailant, because prior to all of that, like, yeah, he was controversial and the magazine was controversial and people were probably offended and didn't like his magazine, but I don't think that he was at risk of being shot. But the moment he starts, becoming blasphemous in some people's minds by combining, Jesus Christ and the Christian faith with his filth and his magazine, that becomes something else entirely. And I think somebody got offended. I think some guy got really offended and riled up after seeing those two things together and decided that he was going to take Flynt out. And Flynt nearly got assassinated to death. And when I first saw this film, I didn't know about the assassination attempt, so it was definitely something that was quite the surprise for me. I was like, "Whoa, I did not see that coming." And I like how the script sets it up too. This older guy who's just kind of hanging around the fringes of the story, just kind of shows up here and there. You're thinking, okay, he doesn't seem like he's the most trustworthy guy. It seems like there's something up with this guy, but you can't quite place it. You don't really know exactly what he's up to or what he's capable of, and then bam, he grabs a gun, goes up into the top of a building across from a courthouse, and then Flynt gets shot. He gets shot by an assailant, with a rifle, who to this day is completely unknown and has never been captured. And not only was Flynt shot, but his lawyer Isaacman was also shot as well. Isaacman was the lawyer that represented him in the case that he lost, where he was initially sent to jail for obscenity, for selling pornography. And Flynt, because he's paralyzed and now he has to use a wheelchair for the rest of his life, he is broken. He renounces his faith. He turns over control of Hustler to Jimmy and Althea. He moves to Beverly Hills. He moves to L.A., where perverts like him are acceptable and normal. And then he quickly spirals into drug addiction because he's depressed and he's dealing with crippling pain. Honestly, I really liked how the writers handled this portion of Flynt's life. They went through it pretty quickly, but they went forward in a way that was still interesting, where he starts his addiction to heroin. He and Althea, they fall back onto the bed and they get all drugged out and they pass out, and Larry locks the steel door to his bedroom, and it's a representation of Larry locking himself out from the outside world and just being alone with his pain and his depression and uh, the drugs. In 1983, he hears about a surgery that could uh, help him with his pain, and he gets the surgery done, and it's successful. It deadens nerves in his back, and he feels rejuvenated, alive again. So he returns back to the publication, winds up firing some people in pretty hilarious fashion. I love how when he comes back, he makes this whole announcement to everybody that the pervert is back. And then Flynt winds up in court again because he leaks videos relating to the John DeLorean entrapment case, which is a thing. The guy who created the DeLorean wound up being involved in a coke deal. And during his courtroom antics, he fires Isaacman. Uh, and then this is just the point where Flynt is just going crazy and mad and utilizing his money in a way that is honestly frivolous, but also in a way that's very outspoken and clever. He basically just starts screwing with the government for fun, for shits and giggles. He's just like, I will show up to these court room appearances, and I'm just gonna play the fool. He wears the American flag as a diaper. wears t-shirts that have provocative slogans on them, spits water at the judge, throws oranges at the judges, and eventually Flynt gets committed to a psych ward after all of this, which is understandably so. The guy is acting like a total nut job. Flynt then publishes a parody ad in which Jerry Falwell tells of a drunken sexual encounter with his mother. Falwell then sues for libel and emotional distress. Flynt countersues for copyright infringement because Falwell copied his ad and used it to raise funds for his legal bills. Case goes to trial in '84, but the decision winds up becoming mixed because Flynt is found liable for inflicting emotional distress, and but he's not liable and is forced to pay damages to Falwell. So it's like one of those things. He's found liable for inflicting emotional distress, but not for libel, which is the whole thing about Falwell having sex with his mother. Althea, who is now also addicted to morphine, she winds up getting a diagnosis of HIV, which is honestly really sad. And Flynt is understandably pissed off that the Hustler staff basically has shunned her, doesn't even want to shake her hand. Flynt arranges a company meeting on a phone call, fires everybody. Althea comes to live with him, but then she winds up drowning in the bathtub after passing out. I was kind of confused, though, on whether or not that was an accident or whether it was an intentional sort of thing. Either way, it's rather tragic and very sad. Flynt presses Isaacman to appeal the Falwell decision to the Supreme Court. Isaacman, understandably, is like, I don't want anything to do with you because your courtroom antics. But Flynt's like, please, man, I want to be remembered for something meaningful. And Isaacman eventually agrees to represent him in the case of Hustler Magazine versus Falwell in 1987. Flynt sits silently in the courtroom, doesn't speak up, doesn't do any madcap antics, and the court overturns the original verdict in a unanimous decision. And I really like the way that the film ends with Flynt alone in his bedroom watching old videotapes of Althea and himself before, everything completely went to shit. Where their lives just spiraled out of control, and Flynt got paralyzed and addicted to the drugs, and Althea got addicted to drugs, and then got HIV, and it's definitely a very sad story. Despite the fact that in the middle of it, there is a moment of genuine triumph. And I think that's in a lot of ways what makes it such a compelling script and story is that, yeah, Flynt is a pervert. He is something else, to say the least. And he's very outspoken and brazen, and he's the type of person that really rubs people the wrong way. And he isn't necessarily the guy with the strongest moral convictions. But none of that matters when it comes to free speech. None of that matters when it comes to protecting your rights. And sometimes it takes people like that to put up a stink, to put up a fight in order to preserve your rights. Yeah, I personally think this is a contender for one of the best courtroom drama scripts of all time. I genuinely feel that way about The People versus Larry Flynt. As good as the script is, as great as the direction is, without the right cast, it just is not going to resonate or really have the same pull. And the cast here is phenomenal. Woody Harrelson is amazing as Larry Flynt. This is honestly one of his best performances to me. Just really strong, awesome stuff by Woody. Does a great job, playing the playful version of Flynt, the sleazy guy, the guy who's a kind of a con man, but also a guy who is just really able to think on his feet and clever in his own way, but also somebody who's emotional, who's prone to outbursts, who's prone to just being wild and a little crazy. And his own comedic sensibilities really shine in this role, as does his dramatic talent as an actor and as a performer. Like the scenes when he's discovering his diagnosis of being paralyzed. That's some really great acting by Woody. As is the moments when he is spiraling and just struggling with depression and drug addiction, and even the moments when he's the over the top court jester and and just doing all these crazy antics is also really great. And Bill Murray apparently was somebody that Milos really wanted for this role. And I could see it, but I'm glad that Woody got it instead. Courtney Love as Althea, she was awesome too. She was amazing in her own right. I mean, I did not know how good of an actress Courtney Love was. I couldn't even believe I was blown away the first time I saw this movie by Courtney Love's acting, and it's still incredible how she showcased the nuances and the layers of her character, her personality, her charm, her roughness, her her rawness as well, and just a lot of things about the character that weren't pleasing to the eye, that were honestly in a lot of ways kind of messed up and screwed up, and she portrayed this character in a way that felt very real. She's definitely somebody who has a ton of issues, but there's a certain sweetness to her that she was able to bring to the character uh, that really shined through. That was really quite something special. And this was the film that set her on a path to be clean and sober for many, many years after. So I think that is definitely something that is really cool as well. That prior to this, in a lot of ways, she was closer to Althea in a multitude of ways. She was a stripper at one point, and she had a lot of issues with drug addiction. And the drug addiction is why Milos was very hesitant on actually hiring her, despite liking the screen test and despite liking what she was providing to him. But he said, "Hey, I'll do this, but you got to promise me that you're going to be clean and sober, that you're going to stay sober. Otherwise, I'm going to have to let you go, and I'm going to replace. I'm going to replace you with somebody else." And she agreed. She promised, and she stayed sober, and the rest is history. Edward Norton is also excellent as Isaacman. Just a really great performance in his own right, as a lot of ways a straight man to Woody Harrelson's Larry Flynt. This no nonsense lawyer who is just having to put up with Flynt, and he just can't quit the guy because they're friends, and he really connects with Flynt, even though it doesn't really make it a lot of sense from the outside that those two would have much of a connection. But you definitely feel that. You feel that friendship when it comes to the scenes between the two, between Woody and Edward. Brett Harrelson is also pretty good too as Jimmy Flint. Donna Hanover does some good work as Ruth Carter Stapleton. Crispin Glover and his one eye. I honestly would like to know what that is about. Like, did he have an eye injury when he did this, or did Arlo just have one eye? Like, I don't know the whole story behind that, but he's just like constant. He does the whole role with like one eye closed. James Cromwell as Charles Keating, just a great scumbag role, like just a pretentious, just stick in the mud type character that you want to smack across the face. Um, Vincent Schiavelli is Chester. I mean, if you're gonna cast somebody who works for a porn magazine, Vincent Schiavelli is like near the top of the list. He's he's the type of actor where you take one look at him, you're like, yeah, he worked for a porn magazine in the 70s. Um, and I also wanted to point out Richard Paul, who played Jerry Falwell. That was another really good performance. And you had Norm Macdonald, who played a network reporter. The cinematography by Philippe Rosselot it is just really solid, really strong, really great stuff. Really nice looking film. The editing by Christopher Teffelson, I also feel is really good. Did a great job providing good transitions for different portions and different parts of this saga, of this story, and also really added some tension and added some extra emotion to a lot of other scenes throughout the movie. The music by Thomas Newman, I like. I don't think the film features a score that I think is super memorable, but it works for the movie. The same thing goes for the chosen songs that they utilize for the soundtrack. I genuinely feel that it's a really compelling story. It's a compelling story with compelling dialogue, with compelling characters. It has a fair amount of laughs and humor and satire and some really a strong social commentary, and it's just a very thought-provoking film, and I highly recommend it if for whatever reason you have not seen it yet. But anyway, that is my thoughts on The People versus Larry Flynt, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.